So we have a partnership with the Rotary Club of Istanbul, Biola, and that's because one of our members in the last couple of years, Ganitsi Kakajola, who's just signed on, was a member of she's from Turkey, joined us from Turkey. And as I mentioned, I've introduced you to Ron. David here, past President David, is from Florida. And the other interesting person, Sir Thomas, who has just been given, Tom Knott has just been given the King Charles III award for his service to his community. So it's a small but an influential group. Okay, we've got Ray Cowan, who's come in from Markham, and Stephen Stein, who's from in Toronto, and Walter Sotka from Toronto, and Walter J, I think, is here. Where's Walter J?
I'm here.
Walter
Yep.
J is from Toronto, and Laura and Sandy and Norma, and we'll see Norma's.
Yeah.
There's Norma.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi.
That's okay. We're
Hello,
fine.
Norma.
We're fine. We're just waiting for Ron Wild, who I hope he hasn't gone to the club to set up.
No. He'll be on.
Okay, great.
He was on a meeting last night. So, okay. So we're forecasting for really bad weather later on today, aren't we?
There's Ron.
Yeah, I just got a notice from the Aga Khan Museum, not that I was going to go out today, but that they're closing early because of the inclement weather. I didn't realize it was that bad or anticipated to be that bad.
Oh, here's Ron.
Okay. Hello, Ron Wild. How are you?
You're muted, Ron.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Ron is a former tech guy, but who's become an artist, and he's done work with the Mars Center, and he's been visiting artists at a number of places. I think one in France, weren't you, Ron, in France?
Yeah, France was a good one. Spain was very interesting.
Marco was talking
In France?
about, yeah.
France?
Yes.
France, I spent a month in Aix-en-Provence.
Nice.
At the Vasarely Foundation complex, just outside the downtown of Aix. Yeah.
Amazing.
That was a long time ago, 2013, for the month of February. And this October, we're going to be back close to there on a bike and barge trip, and I hope to revisit the Vasarely and see what they've done in terms of the renovations that they're planning when I was there.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was fantastic experience.
Hey, Ron, I got one question. Is that Ford the car or Ford the politician?
No, it's
a non-political association here, you know.
Yeah, no, it's old swag from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Years ago, our nephew was doing a work placement with MLSE, and they had a lot of old swag to get rid of. So I got this for free, and yeah, so it's really the Maple Leafs I'm featuring here. But thank you for noticing.
Not saying anything, but both are losers, you know.
Good point. Good point.
It's worth every penny paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. Getting my money's worth. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, when you get tired of it, you could put it in the Oh My Gosh auction next year.
Jackie, it's just so comfortable. I think I'll have this for many decades to come.
Okay. Hi, Craig.
Cool.
Welcome.
Hello.
Great.
There we go.
You can't be painting today, Craig. What are you doing in your car?
I came from an estimate, and I couldn't get home quick enough.
Oh, Okay, that's fair.
So you got snow down there, David?
No, I don't.
That's
It's the warmest.
too bad,
It's the
David.
warmest February they've had on record here. Up in the high 80s for all you Fahrenheit folks.
Mhm.
I'm sitting out on my lanai right now for the meeting. So
That sounds so Hawaiian.
yes, what can I say? But I'm not showing my background because you guys will just get mad. That's all.
Yeah.
Ron, I know that that Marco's got limited time. I don't know if we want to start the meeting
Yeah.
early or not. People can join as they come in.
Good.
Okay, that's a great idea, David. So officially get this meeting started today. Welcome everyone to the February 12th, 2025 meeting of Rotary Toronto Eglinton, exclusively coming to you on Zoom today and broadcasting as far as Florida, and I'm not sure how far north or west or east. As we usually do, we start our meeting with a reflection, and I'd like to call on Jim Moore to do that for us now.
Well, good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to reflect on the new initiative of our club's environmental committee. Under the leadership of Chair Nan Campion, the committee is spearheading a campaign to enlist individual Rotarians in a commitment to reduce their carbon footprint. If the project is successful in our club, we hope to expand the program to other clubs. The focus is on two areas where each of us should be able to be change makers in our daily lives: the food we eat and the fossil fuel energy we burn. With food, the challenge is to reduce the amount of red meat and other ruminants that we eat by 10%. If we aren't meat eaters, and I know some of us are not, our challenge is to reduce our consumption of dairy products by 10%. With fossil fuels, challenge is to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, first of all, our gas mileage by 10%. And if we have natural gas or oil heating at home, the challenge is to turn down the thermostat by 7 to 10 degrees for a total of 8 hours per day. I assume that's 7 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's thank Liz and her committee for challenging us to reduce our individual carbon footprints. This way we can each play our part in the vitally important effort to combat climate change. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Jim. Do we have any guests today other than our guest speaker that
No.
either a member host could introduce or they could introduce themselves? Okay, hearing none, I will ask Jackie now to introduce our guest speaker, Marco.
Right. It's
And as,
absolutely
sorry, Jackie, before you start, I'd like to ask everyone to mute themselves. And David, when our speaker starts, maybe you could mute anyone who hasn't yet muted. Thanks. Go ahead,
I'm
Jackie.
already.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's just a special treat today to introduce you to Marco Chown Oved. Marco writes about climate change for the Star, and you've probably seen his bylines. And there was one in Corporate Knights that was absolutely fantastic about EV purchasing cars and EVs in Toronto. Marco occasionally covers terrorism and international conflicts, and he is reported to the Star's foreign desk from a dozen countries in Africa, South America, the Middle East, and Europe. Previously, Marco was part of the investigative team where he wrote about corruption and tax havens and medical scams and money laundering, all those juicy things that I knew he was going to get into, including the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, the Cartel Project, which received some of the most prestigious media accolades, including the Pulitzer Prize, the Polk Award. And in Canada, his work has been recognized with 2 national newspaper awards, the CAJ Award and a Citation of Merit at the Governor General Michener Awards. Before joining the Star, Marco was a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press in Azerbaijan and the Ivory Coast, and worked for Radio France International in Paris. And that was enough credentials to get his kid into a first language school in Toronto. So I think they made a really, really good decision. So Marco is here today to talk to us about small changes, big climate. And it's based on a podcast that was put out by the Star at the end of last year. Marco hosted talking listeners on a journey exploring individual climate change. Now, doesn't that just resonate with what we're trying to do here at Toronto Eglinton and also in the district, Neelan, right, Neelam? Neelam? Um, uh, is it worth it? Does it make a difference? Unlike many climate reporters, Oved doesn't focus on international summits, national emissions reduction targets, or extreme weather events. Instead, he spends his time talking to the people like us, building a low climate world. And he's found inspiring people rolling up their sleeves to implement climate solutions now. And doesn't that sound like what we're up to? And I have to confess, Marco is a graduate of, the best school in North Toronto. And he also had a twin brother who was there at the same time. And I just thought to myself, what are those guys going to be up to in life? And I'm just so honored to be able to follow their journey, because they're really making a difference in the world, folks. Please welcome Marco Oved Chown. Thank you. Chown Oved, by the way. I never did get that right. All right. Okay.
Jackie, thank you so much for that intro, and thank you, Jim, for your sort of thoughts off the top. And I just thought how appropriate to have that challenge presented to the group on the same meeting that I was able to join you with. And I guess I just wanted to start out by saying that, climate change and environmentalism in general is something I grew up with. I was steeped in from a young age. My folks are hippies. We were, assiduous recyclers, and we were very, we loved going camping and stuff as a kid, but professionally, it was not something I ever looked at until very recently. And I think, to be honest, the reason I switched gears from doing more international stuff and doing all this financial investigation stuff was because I was frustrated, and I was frustrated with the tone and the way we talk about climate change in the media, but in the wider general public. Whenever we talk about climate change, the solutions are often presented as sacrifice, and not to rain on your parade, Jim, but that idea that we need to reduce and we need to cut back and we need to eat lentils and we need to, turn down the thermostat and we need to stop driving and we need to take fewer vacations and all of these things. I just think it's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell to ask people to make these kinds of sacrifices for a distant goal that your grandchildren are going to be facing. And I know that the general rhetoric now is that climate change is here, and we see it in LA and we see it in Jasper, and we see these kinds of effects happening now. But I've always sort of taken the position, and comes across, and when you speak to people who are on the ground making these kinds of solutions, that sacrifice is a tough sell, and that abundance is the far better way of looking at climate change. Solutions, I mean, and the way that the future is not actually going to involve a net zero, low carbon future is not actually going to involve everyone living in, poorer conditions than they do now. The question really is, how can we raise up everyone's living standards around the world so we all live sort of lives of abundance, but in a way that doesn't have that same impact on the environment and on the climate. And it sounds kind of pie in the sky crazy, but I really don't think it is. The more you look at the way this roadmap for climate change solutions, you see how each piece comes together. And so I think before I get into like some of these climate solutions I've focused on and I think are really interesting, I think the last piece I always wanted to bring in is in order to be able to, sort of prescribe medicines and solutions for the future, I think we need to accurately understand what the problem is today. And the problem often is today we sort of say, oh, climate change, it's because of fossil fuels and it's because of man-made, emissions and the plastics industry and coal and all these things, where I think those are symptoms and that the real problem is inefficiency. We have a wildly inefficient energy world that we live in. And when you really start looking at we are so inefficient, but we have so much oil that we don't really even notice it. And so there's some really interesting stats that got me thinking about this. And so one is looking at your car. Here is a highly evolved piece of technology. It's been around for 100 years. It is all over the world. You're in Africa, you're in Asia, you're in North America. People are driving internal combustion engines that are highly precision designed instruments with 100 years of engineering in them. And if you ever asked how much of the energy in the gas tank actually goes to turning the wheels of the car, it's a shockingly low number. The amount of energy in a tank of gasoline, about 80% of it is wasted in friction and heat loss. These are not efficient machines. In fact, so we lose about 80% of that energy every time we drive our cars around, and only 20% are turning the wheels. Now, by contrast, to look at some of what I keep talking about efficiency leading us to energy abundance, leading us to better lifestyles with fewer impacts on the environment, the comparison is, let's take a look at that 80% loss in a gas tank versus how much energy in a battery of an electric vehicle goes to turning the wheels of the vehicle. And the answer is about 97%. So there's only a 3% loss of energy in an electric vehicle versus about an 80% loss of energy in an internal combustion car. And so when you look at that problem, you realize it's not really about the inputs. It's not really about vilifying a particular industry or whatever. It's about creating technologies that more rationally and efficiently use our energy so that there's more of it to go around for everyone and has a way less impact on the environment. And so I always take that as kind of my North Star. And you can see how, wow, electric vehicles aren't just good because they don't burn gas. They're good because they don't waste energy. And so when I take a look at, I think that I wanted to sort of say that taking that philosophy of energy abundance, I've sort of brought it to my beat at the Star. And, I did it for about 2 years and we were sort of pecking around. Climate change is such a massive subject that it's hard to bite off whole. And you end up kind of like, okay, we'll write a little bit about electricity and we'll write a little bit about agriculture and we'll write a little bit about transportation. We'll write a little bit about heating and home, natural gas use. But we got to wrap it all up last year in a really exciting way through a podcast. And I just thought it was one of the first times I got to kind of globally look at all these things and how they fit together. And I thought it'd be a really interesting way to present to you folks today. And so this podcast, as Jackie said wonderfully at the top, is called Small Change, Big Climate. And the principle is very simple. Like, what can individuals do and changes in their life that would make a big impact on the environment? And let's ask those kinds of questions, because I think a lot of times we're under false solutions, right? Things that would require huge amounts of effort and would make a very small impact on the environment. And so one of the classics that is sort of the misnomer is eating locally. And so we did a whole episode on food and where it comes from and what you eat and what its impacts on the climate are. And this was a classic. So we got Dr. James Foley. He's the head of the Project Drawdown. And there's this group of scientists in the United States that have quantified everything. And so he really is the world's expert where you can say, what's more important, this or that? And so I brought him on the show and we asked him, a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't buy imported food because think about how many emissions are caused by bringing that food all the way to us. And he said, you know what? Transportation is a tiny, 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 tiny part of the emissions associated with food. And so eat as many, oranges from halfway around the planet or tomatoes in the winter grown in Morocco or what have you. They're really like, it's not actually an impact. The big impact, as Jim pointed out, is what you eat, not where it comes from. So in a weird way, eating imported food from off the shelf from a Loblaws in Toronto in the dead of winter has a far lower carbon footprint than beef from Ontario. And so beef is always held up as the villain of the sort of food industry, of like the worst food. Everyone's got to cut back on beef. And that's always where you get back into this personal sacrifice narrative. Like, oh, I can't eat beef. I shouldn't eat burgers. It's so bad. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for your health. We shouldn't do it. But turns out it's actually a much more complex argument than that. And that the difference between good beef and bad beef is also massive. You can have beef that has 10 times greater, per pound per pound carbon footprint than a beef that is a low carbon beef. And so again, it's not necessarily don't ever eat beef, but also thinking about what kind of beef you're eating, thinking about where it comes from, how it was raised. And so I got to visit a farm in Ontario that's doing what they call regenerative beef farming. And this is where they look holistically at the soil health and how the beef is being grazed, and the fact that actually when you get into ruminants eating the grass, like free range, out on pasture, the simple act of grazing on the grass actually increases the growth of the grass and the absorption of carbon dioxide into the soil. And so, in fact, grazing beef is actually making the soil suck up more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Will it ever fully cancel out all the inputs into the beef? Probably not, but it makes a huge difference versus grain, lot-fed beef where it's all inputs and there's not a lot of positive, ramifications from grazing. So I always think that like when we talk about climate, we really need to get into the good and the bad, and kind of like not looking for easy, simple blanket solutions that are often about cutting back. Because again, I think when you look at around the world, there's a lot of people who live at a really low level of income, really low standard of life, and inevitably they're going to want to raise themselves up. And it comes back to that question of justice. Like, who are we to tell people in Africa they can't drive cars? Or, if they start making more money, that they shouldn't be able to eat beef. Like, it's hard to sort of say, well, our lifestyle is bad for the environment, so you guys can't aspire to it. And as my background as a foreign correspondent really has fed into that philosophy that I use when I approach climate issues, is I think that we really need to come up with issues or solutions to climate where everyone can participate, and it doesn't involve, well, sure, we can have this, but you guys can't. And I wanted to pivot there and go into, I've given you a lot of sort of the give and take and the on the one hand and on the other, but the way I wanted to finish, and this it feeds right back into what Jim was saying at the beginning, is occasionally there are really obvious, really easy solutions. And so a lot of climate solutions are kind of pie in the sky. And the second you start writing about them, my inbox just fills up with people trying to pitch me on some crazy technology that they say is going to change the world and all these things. And so I've quickly developed a policy that is, if I can't buy it at Canadian Tire or Walmart, I'm not going to write about it. I only write about real things that are available now for folks now that they can use. If you've got some prototype, call me back. Call me back when it's on the shelf. And so that's why I don't like writing about hydrogen. I don't like writing about carbon capture. These are things that maybe one day might make a difference, but again, call me back when it's real. And with that philosophy in mind, we do have this kind of miracle solution. And like, it was just not in a place we were looking. We're always thinking about high tech, new stuff that's going to solve all these problems. One of the greatest climate solutions, especially for northern countries like Canada, are heat pumps. Heat pumps are unbelievable pieces of technology. And it's weird that we even call them heat pumps because it makes it sound like they're new. In fact, heat pumps, all they are air conditioners run in reverse. So this is a technology that's been around for 60 years. It's highly perfected. It's transportable around the world. It's compact. You can size them for different places and different uses. But the heat pump is literally just an air conditioner that runs in reverse. And this single piece of technology already available, you can buy it off the shelf today, and it has just unbelievable bang for your buck. And so I often, when I talk to people in Toronto and they say to me, I've been trying to recycle and cut back on my beef intake, and I'm not going to take that trip down to Florida this year. And I say, you know what? Do all those things. Just get a heat pump. It will have like way bigger of an impact, and you don't have to change your life. Your house will be warm, you'll be comfortable, and you'll reduce your carbon footprint by somewhere in the range of 80%. The amount of emissions that come from a typical home in the greater Toronto region are overwhelmingly, it's about 80% comes from heating your home and heating your hot water. And right now, the vast majority of folks do that with natural gas. And so the heat pump literally, again, takes off the natural gas, does it through electricity, but the key is not the fuel switch. The key is the efficiency. And so this is where I've come full circle here or attempted to come full circle here on the talk, is that what makes heat pumps so unbelievable is how much less energy they use to produce how much more heat. So just again, bang for your buck. And so back, I don't know if anyone has had to replace a furnace anytime in recent memory, but now they talk about these ultra high efficiency furnaces, the best on the market. They're so amazing. They're 97% efficient. And so you're like, what does that mean, 97% efficient? It means for every unit of natural gas you put into this furnace, you're going to get 0.97 units of heat out the other end. So there's a tiny little loss of energy, but they're pretty good. And so you'd say, well, that's not bad. It's only 3% loss. It's not so bad. When you look at heat pumps, their efficiency is somewhere between 250 and 400% efficient. And you say, whoa, 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 how can you get more than 100% efficient? And the answer is that they don't actually create heat. They concentrate heat. So they're grabbing heat from the ambient air around you, and they concentrate it and they shoot it into your house. And it's literally, like I said earlier, it's an air conditioner in reverse. So an air conditioner sucks up the heat in your house and shoots it outside. And a heat pump will do that in reverse. It will suck up the heat outside and shoot it into your house. And we don't need to get into this is perhaps not the best forum for the science behind it, but it is fascinating when you get into refrigerants and how even in a -20, this afternoon when that snow squall starts, it's going to be -15, -18 outside in Toronto. There is heat in that air. As we know from high school science, anything above absolute zero, 0 kelvins, there's heat in it. Like there's energy in the air, even at ultra low temperatures. And that energy can be harvested, concentrated, and sent inside. And so we are literally taking heat from the cold winter outside air and somehow heating your house with it. It's a truly unbelievable piece of technology. I've been writing about them for about a year. I've been to dozens of homes all over the place doing these heat pumps things. And again, when you talk about the individual, you're talking about knocking out in one fell swoop 80% of your carbon footprint. And the bonus about it is it requires pretty much no sacrifice. Sure, you don't change your life, you don't change your house, you don't change how you live. You don't even have to turn down your thermostat because at 400% efficient, what's the point in losing, and being uncomfortable in your home? So, set it at 22 degrees Celsius and sit happy knowing that you're not creating any carbon emissions, or actually very few, because there are some carbon emissions associated with electricity, but very few. And you're heating your house with that. And so to give you a sense of if everyone did it, sorry, before I get there, I was going to say the last thing about this is that the other nice thing about it is that nobody's going out and saying you should rip out a perfectly good furnace and replace it with a heat pump. But there's a natural turnover. Furnaces kind of conk out after 15, 17 years. And so there's a natural turnover. And the real key is when your furnace conks out, that's the moment. You got to spend money anyway. You might as well get a heat pump. And the bang for your buck is huge in terms of carbon reduction. But the other side about it is it involves no sacrifice. It's actually, most people who get heat pumps say, I didn't realize how bad my furnace was in terms of, this room was cold and that room was hot. But having a heat pump has made my house way better. It's more uniform all the way through, et cetera, et cetera. And so, to give you, I guess the last thing I wanted to finish on was just I was talking to some folks who do these sort of regional modeling things recently, and to give you a sense of how much, if everyone did it, what kind of impact this would have. It's far greater than EVs or far greater than cutting back on beef or any of these things, that 45% of all the emissions in the GTHA, so that's like the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, basically runs all the way from Niagara Falls to Oshawa, Belleville, almost. That huge area where I think, more than about a third of Canada's population lives. 45% of all those emissions come from heating your home with natural gas. And so that would be like basically half of all of the emissions of people who live in Canada could be knocked out with something you can buy in Walmart today. So I hope that there's my journey on coming around and approaching writing about climate and approaching writing about, and in a way that I think will, appeals to readers and gets the message out there in a way that doesn't necessarily involve belt tightening and sacrifice. But I'm hoping that as well, I've perked your interest in various things, and I'd love to, answer any questions you guys might have.
Whoever has a question, just go ahead and ask Marco.
Yeah, Norma.
Norma?
I guess I did Google it while you were talking. So the average cost to install the cost for a heat pump in an 1,800 square foot home is around $4,000. Is that correct? That's for the heat pump alone. Then you've got to pay for the insulation. So is it quite a bit? Is it more costly than a gas furnace?
Well, I mean, so I've done a lot of this stuff. The upfront cost is, I think, undeniably a bit more expensive. So the $4,000 you quoted there, to get into the nitty gritty of it, there's three kinds of heat pumps. And you've quoted actually the cheapest one. The cheapest heat pump is what they call a hybrid, and it will it works in conjunction with your furnace. And the idea is it will get you almost all the way through the winter. It'll do all the fall, it'll go right into winter. And on the dead of winter, at the coldest days, your furnace kicks in to sort of take up the coldest part of it. And then when you get in through spring again, the heat pump can take the load. And so those are great because they are sort of low barrier to entry. And typically people get them when their AC conks out. So your AC conks out, you want a replacement for your AC. Well, a heat pump is basically the same exact thing as an AC, except it can run both directions. So instead of getting a unidirectional air conditioner, you get a bidirectional air conditioner, and it will heat your house basically, except for a few weeks in the middle of the winter. And those are about $4,000, right? And again, it's not 4,000 versus zero. Your AC is out. You're going to be spending money. So the real question is, how does it stack up versus an air conditioner? And I think what I've heard is that those hybrid heat pumps versus an air conditioner, they're actually basically same.
Yeah, what I was just thinking of, my daughter has a 1,800 square foot house in Hamilton. Her furnace is conking out, so we may be looking at a furnace down the road. And I'm sorry to say to us, okay, what's it going to cost for ballpark for a heat pump? And I'm thinking be around 10,000.
Well, so that was what I was going to say. So the other kinds of heat pumps are going to fully replace your furnace. That first $4,000 one, you need a furnace to work with it. The other kinds of heat pumps are either called mini splits, and they kind of look like your air conditioner. They install on the wall and they shoot air into your room, or you have a centrally ducted system that's like through that. If you've got ducts in your house and for your furnace, it'll run through the ducts as well. Those costs, I would say you're getting a good deal at 12,000 bucks. They are more expensive than a furnace. The selling point when you get into this sort of thing is that you make your money back quite quickly because they're much cheaper to operate. And second, there are government rebates. And so the government rebate landscape is complex and kind of frustrating. And it changes all the time. It literally has already changed twice since the beginning of the year this year. So, I can recommend folks that you reach out to and they specialize in this stuff. They know, okay, this is the program you want to sign up for and they'll give you some money. But it's so complex and there's multiple programs you want to sign up for and it changes all the time. It's better to reach out to the pros on that one.
And
But,
do heat
but
pumps,
with the rebate, with the rebate, it will get cheaper, on par or cheaper than a furnace.
and do heat pumps only work with duct heating, or could they work with rad heating as well?
So if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said you're out of luck. However, the heat pump technology is really coming along. And so when you want to do rads, they do what they call air to water heat pumps. And so it gets heat out of the air, as we said at the beginning, and instead of shooting it into air in your house, it'll shoot it into what the equivalent of a boiler, and it will use it to heat up air. So heat up water. The nitty-gritty hard part about this is that different radiators need different water temperatures. So some of those, I grew up in an old junky house in Toronto, thin walls, no insulation, and radiators that were so hot you couldn't touch them in the winter. And those old, wrought iron things need really high temperatures. Modern radiators need much lower temperatures. And so again, it gets into complexities around every house, but from what I understand is that you can now definitely get heat pumps that will run radiators, but they need to be modern ones. It's a little more complicated to get that super high water temperature that is required for those old radiators.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We installed a heat pump in our house. This is some 40 years ago, Marco. We liked it at the time. It had many appeals, but then Ontario Hydro screwed us. The electricity rates went up, natural gas rates were coming down. So we used the heat pump less and less, and eventually we switched back to natural gas.
These are the things, I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, there's a green architect in Toronto I interview a lot because he has really been following the ebbs and flows of, at a particular moment in time, this solution makes sense. At a different moment in time, that solution makes sense. And so for a long time, he actually recommended really highly efficient natural gas furnaces because there was so much coal burned for electricity in Ontario until about 15 years ago that he was like, bang for your buck, it's better to just go natural gas. Now that there's no coal anymore, the argument from an environmental point of view is much more obvious that the electricity is just wildly cleaner in every way, shape, and form, produces, astronomically less emissions. And even where it gets a little more complicated as to your current beliefs on the future of the carbon tax and whether it will exist in the future. But if you project out the price of natural gas, how many countries is Russia going to invade? What will that do to gas prices? It's very difficult to project out very far in the future, but the carbon tax led many to believe that there will be a naturally increasing cost of natural gas over the next few years. Now that it's likely to get scrapped, who knows what that means? But we do know how important keeping electricity rates down is politically in Ontario. You know, it's already brought down several governments, and I can't imagine any government's going to be like, we're going to triple the price of electricity. It's just a political loser. So who knows? These kinds of things are very difficult to project out. But what we can say with certainty is you use a lot less energy when you use the heat pump, right? And so unit cost, you can actually afford a higher unit cost because you use so much less energy.
Yeah.
Marco, I
And
have
of
a
course,
question on, sorry.
I was going to say, as
Yeah,
the climate becomes milder, we don't have the severe winters we used to have. Therefore, the heat pump becomes increasingly more effective. You just don't have to lift the heat that much through much greater range of Fahrenheit.
Marco, I have a two-part question. One, your comments are great. You talked about Jonathan Foley, and I think I have worked with his colleagues, Elizabeth Bagley, on the drawdown solutions. And you're exactly right about the low-hanging fruit. We don't need to wait for technological reforms there. But on this question of individual versus institutional choices, we are talking about hydro and Enbridge, etc. I think you've written up about some of the perverse incentives, because there is a lot of greenwashing in the corporate sector, and some of them may actually go counter the longer term objectives too. So that's the shifting thing. But so this is where the individuals get lost. Who do they turn to? So the heat pump, I think that's an excellent starting point. Have you done any looking into solar energy? I know in other parts of the world, that's where the grids aren't there. That's a no-brainer. But here, because in Rotary internationally, right now, there is a 1 million solar panel challenge. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on solar.
Well, the one thing I didn't quite get into very much in our talk today, but underpins it all, is the fact that I'm going to go out on a limb as a reporter here. I don't generally have opinions, but I have a very strong opinion here, and I'm happy to defend it. It's that renewable energy created by the sun and the wind are so preposterously superior to other forms of energy that it is not a question of politics. It's just a question of time before it wins on economics alone. Anyone looking to build electricity today in any country in the world would be crazy to build coal or natural gas or anything like that. It's just simply wildly more expensive, wildly less efficient, and and you can just see it in all the curves around the world. It's one of these things where folks who take a good look at the energy situation around the world, and even organizations that are entirely run by the oil industry, like the International Energy Agency, they'll tell you it's not a question of if renewables will win out. The renewables have already won. It's just perhaps not everyone's noticed it yet. They've already won everywhere in the world. So some of the crazy things that have come out of the year-end stats from last year, we always knew that places like in the Middle East, for example, it's such a no-brainer for solar. People can just put one panel on their balcony and all of a sudden they won't suffer from grid blackouts anymore because that one panel can run, their refrigerator or other appliances in their house and basically make them blackout proof. Then from a grid point of view, you can just blanket places with solar panels and they produce so much electricity. There's also this stuff about they produce electricity when you need it because you often need most electricity in the middle of the day when it's hot and everyone needs their air conditioning on. And as it gets cooler and people turn down their air conditioning, that's at the same time that the solar panel the solar energy is tapering off for the day. And so it actually fits our consumption patterns quite well. But the crazy stuff that came out last year is that when Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was a lot of hand-wringing around this was going to slow down the transition because they were going to reopen coal plants in Europe to make up for their natural gas shortfall, did not come true. 2 years, 2.5 years out now, we are looking, and what it did to Europe was it undeniably accelerated the green energy transition, and they haven't actually reopened any coal plants. And instead, they've quadrupled the amount of green electricity they're bringing online. And it is, believe it or not, even in rainy northern European countries, they're using crazy amounts of solar. And so I think the number that was blowing me away recently was something like 60% of all of Germany's electricity last year was generated by solar. And this is Germany, right? I don't know if you guys have been to Hamburg, but it's not super sunny. And so even countries like Canada, where obviously we're not going to get lots of solar electricity in the winter months, it's so cheap now to build this stuff that it basically is free electricity. And that you can get into kind of like the nitty gritty of permitting and grids, and there are costs associated with it, but the actual solar panel is so cheap now. I mean, it used to cost $100, and now I think they cost $10. And the other last point that I always like to bring up, and this is sort of in response to a lot of the politics we see out of Alberta, where they brought in a moratorium on renewable energy projects, where they had the most healthy energy. They were building more solar and wind than any other province in Canada, and then they brought that to a halt out of, basically, overt political pandering. And they, and they're big supporters of the oil industry, where you can look at places like Texas and see that places can do both at the same time. You can have an oil industry and build renewables. It's not one or the other. And one doesn't prevent the other from thriving. But in Alberta, they are doing a lot of talk, and it seems to hold a lot of weight because they've had such a bad experience with abandoned oil wells. And so people get stuck with like a polluting abandoned oil well on their property, and then the company's gone bankrupt. They're left holding the bag. There's supposedly a public fund that's supposed to help them get their land cleaned up. The public fund doesn't have anywhere near enough money to actually do this. And so people are pissed off. And what they've done is they've tried to bring that same resentment to solar installations and saying, well, we need to make sure that, no one abandons this solar installation and leaves us with this stuff on what if the company goes bankrupt and we're left with the solar panels on our land. To which I always say the two pieces of information that are missing from that discussion are, one, solar panels never stop working. The first solar panel ever made is still making electricity. The first experimental solar panel made in a lab in Oxford, England in the late 1800s still works. The first commercial solar panels that were produced in the 50s in the United States are still producing electricity. They lose efficiency. They don't make as much electricity as they used to, but they never run out. It's not like an oil well that runs dry. There will be no point in the future where these solar panels are, worthless. And so, and the other part, of course, is that solar panels are generally mounted on aluminum stands, which is a wild value. So in fact, if you were left with an abandoned solar farm that for whatever reason wasn't working on your land, you'd probably be able to sell it for tens of thousands of dollars on the scrap metal alone. And so it doesn't, it's a total false flag to say, what about abandoned renewable energy projects? They don't stop producing like oil projects stop producing.
I've got a question. I still, logically, you make all the sense in the world, but I still worry about the politicians because the Premier of Alberta was properly elected and she's running around the country yelling, drill, build, baby, drill. And in the US, we have a president who believes saving the environment is political conspiracy. And the question becomes, how do you overcome that?
Ooh, big question. I would say that's one of the reasons why I focus so much on individual action, because I do think that political operatives ultimately, as imperfect as our democracies are, politicians ultimately are accountable to people. And where public opinion goes, politicians will, kicking and screaming, follow eventually, or they'll be booted out. And so I do think that building grassroots individual support for solutions, and the best way to do it is through experience. If people get a heat pump and love it, then they tell their neighbors and they get a heat pump and love it. And that makes real differences to our emissions, but it also creates a constituency, a political constituency that then pushes, hypothetically, politicians to respond. So, I mean, I'm not in the business of political lobbying, but I do hope that, win-win solutions for the climate based around abundance, not around sacrifice, are a good sell, and that hopefully people will come around to it.
Just one more comment. The only problem is you've got the internet telling people that solar is going to kill your children and then believing them. So how do you make the people believe that alternate energy? What I'm saying is overcoming the politicians is not that easy. In North America,
100%.
they've gone backwards.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things I would say is that so when I spent a bunch of years in Abidjan in West Africa, whenever the lights would go out, everyone would fire up their diesel generators, right? And it would just be this sea of diesel generators spewing noise and fumes all over the place. And it was expensive as hell, and people hated them. And now when you go back, these same folks just have solar panels and batteries, and they're cheaper. They didn't get them because they are politically aligned one way or the other. They got them just because they're a better solution for their life. They're cheaper, they don't make noise, they don't create fumes, and ultimately you don't have to keep feeding it more diesel. When the power goes out, you just flip on your battery that's been charging for free all day long under the sun. And so I do think that there is the sort of ideology and economics. There is a sort of a bigger philosophical question about, whether ideology will convince people to make decisions that are against their own financial interests. But I do think that when you have really wildly better solutions for problems in your life, that somehow you're probably going to go for that, even if it's against your ideology, or maybe get you to shift your ideology. But that is a bigger philosophical question about what will win out. But I think that, renewables do have the edge on economics alone.
I just wanted to sort of try to answer that a little bit. In our own experience, we have a family property in Muskoka, and I would say at least 3 or 4 times a year, the power goes out. There's a long transmission line, trees all over the place, big storm, you lose power. So more and more people are going to solar because you put a few solar panels or a large array of solar panels on your roof. You don't have to worry about that. We had to put in a propane generator because my mother needs oxygen constantly, and we didn't have enough time to get a solar system in place. But when we update things, we are definitely going to solar because it makes so much more sense. And any rural application where you have people spread out long distances away, it's going to make more and more sense for people to either become independent of the grid or have something to supplement the grid. Because when the power goes out, all of the generators on my part of the lake kick in, and you're right, it's all of a sudden you hear a thump 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 thump, thump all over, this chorus of generators, and it's not pleasant. So I agree. I think that as individuals start to understand how they can improve their lives with alternative energy, more and more of it is going to happen, and it won't matter what the politics are. People will just see the benefit, hopefully.
Oh, Lisa, I just to build on that, I think it's really absolutely couldn't agree more that there are even unknown benefits that people don't even realize that they're benefiting from until they've got the thing and they thought they were buying it, for example, to get them through power outages, but it ends up being great for just reducing their power bills, or there are these sort of unanticipated benefits that they get into. But to sort of circle back to the question from before, I I think what's really interesting is that this idea of the politicization of renewable energy as being like folks on the right are against it. You do, I mean, maybe I read too many books in university or whatever, but when you think about the way that energy is done now, it's centrally planned. It's run by giant distant bureau experts and bureaucracies. And you just have to, as a citizen, you have there's no opt-in or opt-out of the grid. Like you're in it whether you like it or not. And whereas alternative energies tend to be democratized, individualized, give you the freedom. You are no longer accountable or responsible or have to pay a bill to anyone else. So you could make a sort of libertarian argument, I think, for renewable energy that you don't often hear very much, especially in the sort of politically charged climate south of the border right now. And it does lead you to question, is this truly a conservative or right-wing mindset that's against renewable energy? Or is this kind of a captured by the large utility companies, who benefits from preventing renewable energy? It's definitely not regular folks. It is definitely the large corporations that have been embedded in our energy system for 100 years.
Yeah. Mhm.
Marco,
I have a couple of comments more than that. To begin with, to Walter, I can assure him that it does work with heat pumps to radiators, because in my native Sweden, probably 90% of the homes are heated by hydronic systems. And then it's something embarrassingly, I should know, but can you sell your renewable energy back to the grid? In Sweden, that is one of the key elements for people to install solar, that you can sell excess heat to the grid.
So in Ontario, currently, they no longer allow individuals to sell renewable energy back into the grid. They used to. It was called the
that's what I
microfit
thought.
contracts, and they were given preferential prices, and then it became a political scandal, and people said we're paying too much for this electricity, and they ended them. So currently now, if you get panels on your roof, they only allow what's called net metering. So you're able to cancel out your bill. You'll sell energy into the grid, but only up into the energy you use from the grid. And any excess that you sell into the grid, you give it to them for free.
Mhm.
It's a good
Unfortunately,
example of what politicians can or can't do.
Mhm.
unfortunately, I'm going to have to call this a very interesting discussion to an end. We respect Marco has other commitments. In a second, I'm going to ask Nan Campion to thank Marco on our behalf. But before I do, I want to just quickly reiterate something Marco said at the early part of his talk, and that's his podcast. While he was talking, I admit I multitasked and I subscribe to his podcast. Again, it's called Small Things, Big Climate. You get that wherever you get your podcasts. I went on Spotify, and you can hear more. They're each about 30 minutes long, and you can learn more about heat pumps, beef, plastic, e-bikes. Highly recommend that our members who are interested in these topics follow Marco's podcast. So Nan, could you officially thank Marco on our behalf, please?
I would love to. Marco, that was amazing. I have yet to have heard someone more positive than you talk about climate change. I think the problem is usually it's all doom and gloom, and this is terrible. And as you say, we have to cut back. We can't do this. We can't do that. Whereas if we can see the future in a positive and, as you say, abundant lifestyle, it's much more rewarding, and I think we'll accomplish much more. Here at our Rotary Club, we just started a challenge you might be interested in, 10% reduction of our carbon footprint. I must admit, I didn't dare to suggest everybody change their furnace to a heat pump yet, but we'll get there. Anyway, it was absolutely amazing and very positive, and thank you for your information.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marco. We're going to go on now with the business of our club. We appreciate you've got other matters to investigate and report on. Thank you for speaking with us today.
And thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to meet folks, and my I'm easily findable, Googleable. But you know, if you do have any questions that I wasn't able to get around to, you can always email me. I have a very easy email to remember. It's Oved or moved@thestar.ca. So please do reach out, and I'd love to keep the conversation going. And thanks again for the invitation.
Great, super. Thank you. And thanks to Jackie for getting Marco set up to speak with us. So now we will move on to Happy Bucks, and as part of that, does anyone have a birthday coming up that they want to let us know about? Or Happy Bucks in general? And I'm not going to keep track of Happy Bucks. We're going to use the honor system. Whatever you pledge online as Happy Bucks, maybe at the end of the month, keep track of that and send it in as an e-transfer or get it to our treasurer somehow. Anyways, Happy Bucks are open if there are any.
Yeah, Ron, $10 from me. I think I saw Stephanie on the here, and I don't know if David already has welcomed her, but Stephanie approached us, and I guess this is the first meeting, and I can hardly think of a better meeting, actually. And again, thanks, Jackie. I also have to apologize to Glenn, who had planned to actually be at the opera on Friday evening, kindly decided that he would come with me to bingo instead. So we showed up at bingo for 8 o'clock to 10, only to finding that we were supposed to be there at 2 instead. So it is a little bit shameful to have to admit that I screwed it up, but that is what happened. So the happy thing there is that Glenn was very kind and understanding.
It's not the end of the world, Lars. We all, these things happen.
Any other Happy Bucks?
Yeah, I actually have 20, because 10 is my friend who passed away in 2023, my best friend. His widow and I have been trying for a year, over a year, to get some of his investments back from the United States. And yesterday I finally got a phone call that the check is in the mail. It only took 14 months to accomplish it. So that's worth 10. And the other 10 is because next Tuesday, everything goes according to plan, I will be flying off to Malta for 2 weeks and getting away from this. So that's surely worth $10, getting away from winter for a couple of weeks.
Okay, there's no other Happy Bucks. We'll go into our
Ron,
report.
Jackie.
Sorry.
Jackie, you're muted.
Thanks, David.
You're still muted, Jackie.
Left hand.
There you go.
Okay, $10 for excellent medical care at Sunnybrook in the last 3 days. My surgeon was a graduate of the TDSB, went to McMaster. You know, and I just got a call, you know, at the beginning of this meeting from them. They wanted to know how I was. So anyway, we're so fortunate to have Sunnybrook in our midst.
Here, here.
Maybe Jackie, not everyone knows that you broke your wrist.
Well, it's the second time and I really smashed it. So I had to have, pins and plates and whatever. So I'm sure the pain is going to start soon, but right now I'm feeling really great.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move now on to reports. And I believe, Nan, you want to give us a very quick environmental update. And Glenn, you'll be next.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say was we're starting officially to do our calculations as of March the 1st. but we've only had 2 people sign up and send us the forms so far. So if I know a lot more were planning to join in, so if you'd fill out those forms and send them to me, that would be great. Thanks.
Great, thanks for the reminder, Nan. I have the paper printed out, so I'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, and actually, you were sort of a bit late joining, Nan. Jim Moore did a great job in the invocation, speaking about your environmental initiatives. Now, Glenn will have a community service update.
Yeah, I actually don't have a lot. I didn't know I was on the agenda until I saw the email from Stephen last night. And I sent out a community service report on
Glenn,
Friday
great report.
by way of Laura. So thanks to Laura for sending it out. And so pretty much everything was in there. Maybe the only other thing to let you know is, again, Habitat for Humanity is definitely looking for volunteers for their restores. And that on May 7th, Kathy Bremner from the Allen's Gardens Food Bank is going to be our in-person speaker to talk about just how dire the situation is with food banks nowadays. But other than that, unless anybody has any questions, everything else was in the note on Friday.
I just think it was a great report, Glenn, and I really like the pictures because Tom Knott and I are hoping to be able to put together some kind of an impact statement for our donors. And those are just fantastic pictures. Norma Davis is quite a model for community service.
We've basically been telling people to try and wear their T-shirts when they're bringing the checks or whatever, so that's very prominent in the photo.
David, where is the check? Because
it's at the club. It's on top of it or inside.
So Walter Sotka, you can get it for us because we may be giving a check or maybe pretending to give a check to Leora from Facing History.
Yeah, Walter, it's either inside or on top of the black cabinet down in the basement.
Okay, well, I'll look.
Yeah, we should be using that. I know that, Glenn, you guys have been giving out checks. You really should be using the bigger check. It makes such a bigger impact.
Okay, actually, a good place to place checks would be inside the laptop case.
No, we're talking about the
we're talking about the big check.
Oh, okay, great. I got it.
I did see it in the basement when we packed up the stuff last time. So it is there.
Okay.
It's just to the side of the cabinet.
I understand it's sometimes a challenge because if I'm delivering to Fred Victor on Bay Street, then I've got to go all the way up to the lawn and tennis to get the check and then come back, and we do it outside in the cold. So it's a challenge. I understand that you prefer the check. So what I did is I just took my coat off, put a shirt on, took the picture, put the coat back on.
Whatever works. If you can make it work, then great. If you can't, we understand too.
Sure.
Ron, can I just jump in before you give it to Lars? Lars already said, but I think Stephanie wasn't on. She was dealing with her child. But Stephanie, we just wanted to welcome you to your first meeting. I know you reached out to both Lars and myself, and we're glad you could make it to this one. Hopefully you'll be able to make it out to one of our in-person meetings. I know childcare is always a little difficult midday, but welcome, and I hope you enjoyed our presenter today. He was great.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
President Lars, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Jackie. Your students, former students.
I know. Are they? His brother is an award-winning photographer in Los Angeles. But boy, those kids were really, you just knew they just went against the grain. You know, you could say whatever you said, there was, they had a different perspective. I just knew they were going to be successful in whatever they did. And it's so nice to reconnect after 20 years.
Yeah, actually it comes to my mind that some of these speakers, and not necessarily only the ones from Northern, could be interesting for us to organize an event in the local community to let people outside of the Rotary family get to know too, because certainly what Marco talked about makes full sense and would draw quite an audience. Anyway, it is today Pat Bartlett Day. And what is that? Pat Bartlett, for those newer members, was a very positive member of our club for many years and involved in trails. But it's actually the International Hug Day. And the word hug, I learned, is Old Norse, hug, hugga, which also we can find today in the Danish hygge, comfort. And interestingly, hugs will lift your spirit, lower your blood pressure, and boost your immunity. And on the site I found out about this, they suggested ways to celebrate Hug Day. One could have a morning hug. One could hand out hug coupons, maybe a fundraiser for us. Hug marathon, and the world record is, and this, I don't really know how it went, but it is by all means set by a Canadian, or more than one Canadian, I guess, in 2010. And the record is 36 hours and 36 minutes.
Oh, somebody was just getting a hug. We missed it.
Yeah.
Do it
well,
again,
we can
Tom.
actually, another suggestion is a virtual hug. So that is, or we could have a hugathon, arrange that. And there was also, which I think can lead to some interesting speculations, surprise hugs. I'm not sure that everyone would appreciate getting a surprise hug. But anyway, what would happen if you hug Donald Trump? He may melt. A couple of other things, and I'm not going to go on, but actually today in 1771, King Gustav III became the King of Sweden. And outside Sweden, he's probably best known thanks to Giuseppe Verdi and the Un ballo in maschera, the masquerade ball. And I could go on and on. It actually, he was assassinated, and that's what the opera is about. He was assassinated in 1792 at the Opera House in Stockholm at the Masquerade Ball, and a lot of other things. An interesting thing, what happened today in 1949 was that Denmark played Canada in ice hockey, and the score was 47-0 for Denmark, for Canada. And it has been a great day for Wayne Gretzky. In 1982, he hit his 153rd point in the season, and I think that is still a record. And in 1989, he was at it again, scoring his 45th hat trick. And that made him have the 10th season scoring 40 or more goals. The Olympics in Vancouver opened on this day, and some Rotary business. No club challenged the selection of Tina Martin as our district governor in 26-27. So she is now formally appointed district governor for that Rotary year. And that's the end of it. But once again, thanks for a very good presentation, high class.
Thank you, Lars. Does anyone else have anything for the good of Rotary before we close?
Just a comment about the importance of investigative journalism in the world and in Canada. And a colleague of Marco's is another Northern grad. His name is Kenyon Wallace. And I was trying to get Kenyon to donate some funds for a scholarship at Northern for a kid who was going into journalism. And he said, Jackie, it's a dying breed. He said, we're just fighting for survival at newspapers to keep these investigative journalists on you know, hired. So that really upset me. I mean, I don't know. It's the reason I guess we should all continue to buy the Globe and the Star and support newspapers that have investigative journalism. Because where would we be without them? I mean, isn't this what's happening in the U.S.? You know, they're being co-opted by big tech and government and whatever. We're just so fortunate that we're still where we are in Canada with respect to investigative journalism.
I think it's really disappointing, and I talk to young people, my own children, they said, Mom, we get it online. You know, I subscribe to both the Journal and the Star, even though I don't get a chance to read them all the time, because I just believe in supporting them. But are the young people getting their news through newspapers? I don't know. How many know young people who get their news through CBC? You know, they get it. CBC is going to be gone if once Polyev gets in, because he's gonna cut CBC. I just find it really depressing.
This is the kind of discussion we can continue next week. We'll be meeting at the Toronto Lawn Tennis Club.
Ron, just one thing. It is also a board meeting. So if someone, the board knows that it's a board meeting on Tuesday, but if someone not on the board is interested, either in having something brought up or attending, because it's Zoom, please let us know.
Great, thanks, Liz.
Ron, can I share a short video if we have time?
Okay, what we'll do is we'll close out the meeting, and those who have to leave can leave, and anyone who wants to stay on, Ganesi, if David can do the screen share, we'll run a video for those who are interested. Okay.
Everybody's going to stay on for Gunitzi's video.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
People
you.
might have other commitments,
We
and
have a message from the Rota founder, Nevinyasa. So I would like to share her message to our club.
Sure.
Okay. Is David set up to do that?
She just has to share her screen. She's good to go.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Yeah. Okay.
You haven't shared, Ganesi. Ganesi, you haven't shared it.
I haven't?
No, you got to share your screen first.
Oh, no, I did. I believe I did. Now?
No.
Am I sharing?
Yeah, now you are.
It's coming now. Yep. Okay, we're good to go. Appreciate everyone's patience with our Zoom and AV and sound challenges.
Maybe you could start it at the beginning, Gunitzi, put the red.
I'll try. Thank you.
There's Naveen. She flew over. Yeah, great.
We're not going to get volume.
Is it going on now?
Yeah, but no volume.
No sound.
No volume?
Your generosity has made an enormous difference. Because of you, our work with the Zeppelin community project has grown, flourished, and touched so many lives in ways we couldn't have imagined. Your commitment has transformed with reality for children, families, and individuals who are working hard to overcome challenges and build brighter futures. Thank you for your support through this being able to achieve incredible milestones through our own projects. How we able to show alone to develop essential needs with a very strong foundation for their future. With access to quality education, these children are gaining skills that will empower them throughout their lives. Through workshops and hands-on training, by teaching young people critical life skills. Confidence and Thank you for standing with us, for believing in the climate change, and for leading us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to note that last month there was a great fire in the garbage city, Cairo, and our club contributed $900 for this fire because 75 families was out of home. So thank you so much to Norma and Jim for their generous contributions. And thank you, Jackie, providing us the bucking fund for this contribution. Thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Can I just add something to Ganitsi's comments? The Zabaleen people are Coptic Christians in the middle of Cairo, and you know that they're a minority, almost a disadvantaged minority. They make a living and have historically by sorting garbage. They live in a former quarry where they took the marble and stuff for the pyramids and where the ancient Egyptians built. And when Norma and I were in Cairo, Norma tried to hijack the bus and get the bus driver to drive us into the Zabaleen community. And he said, "Oh, no. But anyway, we got to just see the general area. And to think that, so the Zabaleen people have carved out churches in the side of the quarry, and then they've got schools and their houses. But somehow they must have other buildings. But to see, like when you think they make a living by recycling and selling garbage. So you saw all the bottles there. We supported that glass cutting project where they sold vases and stuff to the community. And then we bought them looms and they sold shawls and whatever. And then to have this, and Naveen herself is a Coptic Christian, and her grandfather, if any of you go to Cairo, her grandfather was the main benefactor for the Coptic Museum in Cairo, and one of its famous art pieces is the Black Jesus that was done in about 300 AD by an out of Ethiopia, and of course that gave credence to the idea that Jesus was black. But anyway, they are a kind of a discriminated against community, and I was asking Naveen, look, because she has this private fund, being a Coptic Christian and supporting the most disadvantaged people in Cairo. I said, "Can you get any support from Rotary over there?" And she said, "No." No, she said they only support government projects. If they can get a government grant to build a school, it builds their personal reputation, their business reputation, and it glorifies the government. So we really are helping the most disadvantaged people. And the fact that, after the fire, she flew over for a week to do an assessment and then put out the word through District 707, "Can you help me? We've got to rebuild these houses." So thanks to Ganitsi, for leading this and getting the money over to her.
Thank you, Jackie.
Good.
Okay, I think Ron has left. So I guess that's it for the meeting today.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Yes, we.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.